Listen closely. Do you hear it? That soft, scraping sound, like fingernails on silk, or perhaps the quiet erosion of a soul against the rough edges of domesticity. It's the sound of passion dying in its sleep, comfortable at last in its casket of routine. I once knew a man who collected butterflies. Beautiful things, he'd say, pinning their wings to corkboards with the precision of a surgeon and the detachment of a mortician. He'd show them to visitors with pride. Here, the monarch. There, the blue morpho. Each one perfectly preserved, perfectly dead. One evening, after too much wine and not enough lies, he confessed, "I started collecting them because I loved how they moved. Now I own hundreds, and none of them dance." This is what we do to love, isn't it? We catch it wild in the garden of possibility, drunk on its erratic flight patterns, intoxicated by its refusal to be predicted. Then we bring it home. We give it a name. We build it a house with mortgage payments and Thursday night rituals. We teach it to say, "I love you too," at precisely the right moments, like a parrot that's learned which sounds earn the most seeds. Schopenhauer wrote that life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. But he forgot to mention what happens when the pendulum stops swinging, when we nail it to the wall and call it stability. There's a special kind of death that comes from getting exactly what you thought you wanted. The Greeks had a word for it: ataraxia, the absence of trouble. They considered it the highest good. They were wrong. It's the highest nothing. In the summer of 2024, researchers at Northwestern University discovered something delicious in its cruelty. Couples who reported the most stable relationships showed the least activation in the brain regions associated with reward and novelty. The scientists called it hedonic adaptation. I call it the slow suicide of the heart. We've literally trained our brains to stop seeing the person we claim to love most. They become wallpaper, expensive wallpaper that snores. Kierkegaard understood this. He broke off his engagement to Regine Olsen not because he didn't love her, but because he loved her too much to watch their love become a Sunday dinner conversation. "The moment I make her mine," he wrote, "she stops being the woman I fell in love with." He chose the pain of absence over the death of presence. Most would call him a coward. I call him the only honest lover I've ever read about. Have you ever watched a candle burn in a jar? At first, it flickers wildly, throwing shadows that dance like drunken spirits on the walls. But slowly, inevitably, it consumes the oxygen in its little prison. The flame grows smaller, steadier, dimmer. It doesn't die dramatically. It suffocates politely, without disturbing anyone. This is institutionalized love, a flame that's learned to breathe less so it can burn longer. There's an old Romanian folk tale about a woman who loved a wolf. Every full moon, she would meet him at the edge of the forest, and they would run together through the silver darkness. One winter, she grew tired of the cold, tired of the uncertainty. She lured the wolf into her cottage with promises of warmth and safety. She fed him from her table, let him sleep by her fire. Within a month, he'd forgotten how to hunt. Within 2, he would no longer howl. By spring, when she opened the door to set him free, he only looked at her with the eyes of a dog. The modern dating apps understand this tragedy better than any philosopher. Bumble's 295 user data revealed that 73% of users list looking for something serious, while simultaneously maintaining active profiles for an average of 3.2 years. We want the wolf, but we swipe for dogs. We want the storm, but we settle for the weather report. We want love that burns, but we invest in love that pays dividends. Here's the grotesque beauty of it all. The grave where passion sleeps is lined with the softest silk. It's temperature controlled. It has excellent reviews on Yelp. The corpse of desire wears matching pajamas and remembers anniversaries. It's so comfortable, so reasonable, so sustainable. It's everything love should be, except alive. Nietzsche warned us, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. But we've traded our chaos for coffee makers that start brewing at 6:47 a.m. sharp. We've exchanged our dancing stars for LED bulbs that last 25,000 hours and never surprise us. We've buried passion in the backyard and planted a sensible garden over its bones. Tell me, and be honest, though I know honesty is the last luxury we allow ourselves. When was the last time love made you feel genuinely insane? When did it last make you write bad poetry at 3 a.m. or consider changing your name and moving to Prague? When did it last make you feel like you were dying and being born in the same breath? If you can't remember, then you already know where to find it. It's in that comfortable grave you've been tending so carefully, the one with the lovely flowers and the reasonable visiting hours. The longer you stare, the less of you it reflects. There's a mirror in my grandmother's house that's been lying for 3 generations. It's one of those old Victorian pieces, all tarnished silver and dark wood, the kind that makes everyone look like they're dying of consumption in the most romantic way possible. My grandmother swears it shows the truth. I think that's precisely why it lies. Here's a secret that shouldn't be spoken after midnight. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with our reflection in their eyes. Every "I love you" is really, "I love who I become when you look at me." Every kiss is a negotiation with our own ghost. We're all narcissus, but we've learned to use other people as our pools. Last week, I watched a couple at a cafe. Let's call them the obituary of romance. She was scrolling through her phone, occasionally showing him something that made him nod without looking. He was doing that thing men do where they stare at nothing and call it thinking. Between them sat 2 cups of coffee growing cold, like hope left out overnight. But here's what killed me. When the waiter came, they performed love. Her hand found his eyes found hers. They smiled that smile that says we're happy, in a language nobody speaks anymore. The moment the waiter left, they returned to their separate screens, their separate silences. They were in love with the idea of being a couple in love. The mirror of public performance was the only place their relationship still lived. Kierkegaard called this the immediate stage of existence, living only in the reflection of others' gazes. But even he didn't anticipate Instagram, where we've built halls of mirrors so elaborate that we've forgotten which reflection started the whole charade. A 2025 study from Stanford found that couples who post more about their relationships on social media report lower satisfaction in private. We're so busy curating love's appearance that we've forgotten to live it. We're taxidermists working on a patient that's still breathing. I'll tell you something worse. Something that tastes like copper pennies and old secrets. The person you think loves you? They're in love with someone who doesn't exist. They're in love with a version of you that you perform. A character you've been perfecting since the first time someone told you your real self wasn't quite enough. And you're in love with the person they pretend to be when they're trying to deserve the person you're pretending to be. It's mirrors reflecting mirrors, all the way down to the void. The Japanese have a ghost story about a mirror that steals souls. Every time you look into it, it takes a piece of your true face and replaces it with what you want to see. Eventually, the mirror contains your entire self, while you become the reflection, beautiful, empty, and utterly dependent on being observed to exist. They say you can hear these mirrors laughing in empty houses, surrounded by the souls of those who looked too long and forgot what they really looked like. But here's where Nietzsche grins from beyond the grave. There are no facts, he said, only interpretations. So what if the mirror lies? What if every reflection is a fiction? The question isn't whether you're seeing the truth. It's whether you're brave enough to stop looking. I knew a woman once who refused to date anyone for a full year. Not out of heartbreak, not from lack of opportunity, but from a kind of spiritual exhaustion. I realized, she told me over wine that tasted like regret, that I had no idea who I was when nobody was watching. I'd been a girlfriend so long, I'd forgotten how to be a person. She spent that year doing things nobody would ever know about, writing poems she'd never share, taking walks at 3 a.m., learning to cook elaborate meals for one. She was building a self that didn't need witnesses. When she finally started dating again, something had changed. She no longer morphed into what she thought men wanted. She no longer used their desire as proof of her worth. The mirror still lied, but she'd learned to look away. Some called her cold. I called her free. Modern psychology has a term for this: differentiation of self. It's the ability to maintain your identity while in close relationships. But the textbooks make it sound so clinical, so achievable. They don't tell you it feels like performing surgery on yourself without anesthesia. They don't mention that becoming real means disappointing everyone who fell in love with your performance. There's an old Persian proverb, "The moon is beautiful because it doesn't care if you're looking." This is the paradox of authentic love. It begins only when you stop needing it to validate your existence, when you stop checking your reflection in their reactions, when you stop adjusting your personality like it's a Halloween mask that doesn't quite fit. Here's my question for you, whispered like a curse or a blessing, depending on your courage. Who would you be if nobody was watching? If there were no mirrors, no eyes, no Instagram, no audience for your carefully rehearsed spontaneity, would you recognize yourself? Or would you discover that you've been a reflection so long, there's nothing left to reflect? The mirror in my grandmother's house broke last winter. She hasn't replaced it. "I'm too old," she said, "to care what I look like to ghosts." But I think she meant something else. I think she meant she was finally old enough to exist without proof. Some nights, I practiced looking at myself without seeking beauty or flaw, without judgment or hope. Just looking, the way you might look at a tree or a stranger's dog. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. But sometimes, for just a moment, I catch a glimpse of something that might be real. It's terrifying, it's ugly, it's mine, and it's enough. Desire is a fire that grows by consuming what it was meant to warm. Have you ever noticed how the hungriest people at the buffet are always the ones who've already eaten? Watch them sometime, plate after plate, their eyes growing wider as their stomachs grow fuller, possessed by a peculiar panic that somewhere, somehow, they're missing the best dish. This is desire in its purest form, a mouth that opens wider the more you feed it. I'll tell you a story that nobody should tell, about a man I knew who collected women like vintage wines. Not to drink. No, that would imply satisfaction. He collected them to know he could. Each conquest was supposed to fill some cavity in his chest, that hollow place where his father's approval should have lived. But here's the sick joke. Every woman who said yes made the hole bigger. Every kiss was a shovel, digging deeper into emptiness. By the time I met him, he was sleeping with 3 different women a week and crying himself to sleep every night, wondering why he felt emptier than when he'd been a virgin. Schopenhauer saw this coming. "Life is a constant process of dying," he wrote, probably while eating breakfast alone and loving it. But he missed the punchline. It's not life that's dying, it's satisfaction. We're built like leaky vessels, forever filling ourselves with experiences, people, achievements, substances, and watching them drain out through cracks we can't find in the dark. The neuroscience is deliciously cruel. A 2024 Harvard study mapped the dopamine response in serial daters. First date, fireworks. Second date, sparklers. By the 10th person, their brains showed less excitement than someone checking their email. They'd literally worn out their capacity for romantic joy, like a tongue that's tasted too much sugar and can no longer detect sweetness. Yet they kept swiping, kept dating, kept feeding the hunger that feeds on eating. But wait, it gets better. Or worse. In this economy of the soul, they're the same currency. There's a Tibetan myth about a type of ghost called a hungry spirit. Creatures with enormous stomachs and mouths the size of pinholes. They can never eat enough to feel full. They wander the earth in constant agony, surrounded by food they can barely taste. The monks say these aren't supernatural beings. They're metaphors for human desire. They're us, dressed up in our weekend best, forever ordering one more drink, downloading one more dating app, planning one more escape from the present moment that's never quite enough. I once watched a documentary about a man who'd slept with over 3,000 people. The interviewer asked him about his favorite experience. He sat there for a full minute, this conquistador of bedrooms, this Don Juan of the digital age, and finally said, "I can't remember a single face clearly. They all blur together like a watercolor painting left in the rain." Here's what Nietzsche knew that we pretend we don't. The will to power isn't about domination. It's about the constant overcoming of oneself. But we've confused overcoming with consuming. We think if we eat enough experiences, we'll finally feel full. If we love enough people, we'll finally feel loved. If we achieve enough goals, we'll finally feel worthy. We're trying to fill an existential hole with material dirt. The dating apps know this. They've gamified loneliness into a slot machine that pays out in dopamine hits and disappointment. Tinder's own data from 2025 shows users swipe through an average of 4,000 profiles before deleting the app, only to re-download it within 6 weeks. We're not looking for love. We're looking for the next hit of possibility. We're addicts pretending to be romantics. But here, lean in close, because this is where the knife twists. There's a different kind of hunger. The mystics knew about it. Rumi wrote, "Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray." This isn't the hunger that feeds on eating. This is the hunger that feeds on fasting. The desire that grows sharper with denial, clearer with emptiness. I met a man last year who'd been single for 5 years by choice. Not a monk, not broken, not afraid. Just selective. I realized, he said, stirring coffee he'd forgotten to drink, that I was using people like Band-Aids for wounds that needed surgery. So I stopped. I sat with the pain instead of trying to fuck it away. And something strange happened. The hunger changed. It stopped being about filling a void and started being about making space for something worth having. The Germans have a word, Sehnsucht, for a type of longing that can never be satisfied, a yearning for something indefinable. C.S. Lewis called it the inconsolable longing in the heart for we know not what. This is the hunger that doesn't feed on eating. It feeds on being, on accepting the incompleteness, on understanding that the hole in your chest isn't a flaw to be fixed, but a window to the infinite. Modern culture sells us solutions to hungers we didn't know we had. Dating coaches promise to teach you abundance mindset. Pickup artists sell sexual strategy. Relationship experts peddle attachment-style optimization. They're all missing the point with such spectacular precision it's almost beautiful. You can't optimize your way out of existential emptiness. You can't strategize your way into wholeness. So here's my question, carved into your conscience like graffiti on a church wall. What if you stopped trying to feed the hunger? What if you let it burn, bright and clean and honest? What if the emptiness you're running from is actually the space where your soul is trying to grow? The hunger that feeds on eating will devour you from the inside out, leaving nothing but appetite and ash. But the hunger that feeds on fasting, that's the fire that burns away everything false, everything borrowed, everything that isn't truly you. It hurts like birth hurts. It hollows you out like a flute, so that life can finally play its music through you. Choose your hunger wisely. One leads to obesity of the soul. The other leads to a kind of starvation that feels mysteriously like coming home. The king of solitude rules a kingdom invisible to those who fear its borders. In the forest of the forgotten, where no paths lead and none return, stands a throne of thorns and silence. Only the brave enough to burn can sit upon its cruel cushion and call the darkness home. I wrote that at 4:17 a.m. last Tuesday, in that peculiar state between sleeping and waking where the truth slips out before your ego can catch it. I was thinking about emperors, not the ones in history books, but the ones who walk among us unrecognized, wearing their sovereignty like an invisible cloak. Society has a word for men who don't need anyone. Lonely. It's meant as an insult, a diagnosis, a problem to be solved. He must be damaged, they whisper. Who hurt him, they wonder. He'll die alone, they prophesy, as if dying in a crowd is somehow superior to dying on your own terms. They can't fathom that solitude might be a choice, not a sentence. That alone might be a palace, not a prison. But Nietzsche knew. God, how he knew. The lonely one offers his hand too quickly to whomever he encounters, he warned. But he also wrote this: I go into solitude so as not to drink out of everybody's cistern. There's a difference between loneliness, that needy, grasping thing that makes you text your ex at 2 a.m., and solitude, that sovereign state where you finally stop needing other people to confirm you exist. I'll tell you about the richest man I ever met. Not money rich. That's the poor man's idea of wealth. Soul rich. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like books and good coffee. Never married. No kids. His phone rang maybe twice a week. When I asked him if he was lonely, he laughed. Not bitter, but genuinely amused. "Lonely," he said. "I have a library of 3,000 books, each one a conversation with a brilliant mind. I have my thoughts, which after 67 years have become quite good company. I have my morning walks where I watch the world wake up. I have my evening wine where I watch it fall asleep. I have my work, my music, my silence. Tell me, what exactly am I missing?" The modern world is terrified of men like him. A 2025 MIT study on social connectivity labeled adults with fewer than 3 close relationships as at risk. At risk of what? Of not needing the constant validation of others? Of not contributing to the group chat? Of discovering that most human interaction is just sophisticated noise? Here's what they don't tell you about the crown of solitude. It's heavy, not because it's lonely, but because it's real. When you stop using others as mirrors, you have to face what you actually look like. When you stop using relationships as painkillers, you have to feel your actual pain. When you stop running from yourself into the arms of others, you have to sit with whatever it is you've been running from. There's a Sufi story about a king who gave up his throne to become a wandering mystic. Years later, his former subjects found him sitting alone under a tree, wearing rags. "Don't you miss your palace?" they asked. "Miss it," he replied. "I'm sitting in it right now. I just learned how to make it portable." This is the secret monarchy of the self-sufficient man. His kingdom goes wherever he goes. His throne is built from self-knowledge. His crown is made of the decisions he's made in the dark, when no one was watching and no one would know. His wealth is measured in how little he needs from others to feel complete. But let me be viciously clear about something. This isn't about becoming some pseudo-spiritual hermit who posts quotes about loving yourself, while secretly dying for someone to notice how enlightened he's become. That's just loneliness wearing a costume. True solitude doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It's too busy being free. The Japanese have a concept called kizuna, the bonds between people. But they also have hitori, the art of being alone. In Japan, it's perfectly normal to go to movies alone, eat at restaurants alone, travel alone. They don't see it as sad. They see it as a skill, because they understand what we've forgotten. You can't give what you don't have. You can't love from emptiness. You can't connect if you're not first connected to yourself. I watched a man at a bar last month, sitting alone with his whiskey and his thoughts. A woman approached him, beautiful, interested, available. They talked for 10 minutes. She gave him her number. After she left, he looked at it for a long moment, then left it on the bar with his tip. The bartender, confused, asked why. The man smiled. "Because I'm not lonely enough to pretend I'm interested, and she deserves someone who is." That's the crown nobody sees. The ability to choose solitude over settlement. To prefer your own company to the wrong company. To understand that being alone is only lonely if you're not someone you enjoy being with. Kierkegaard spent his life wrestling with this paradox. He called it the single one, the individual who stands before existence without the comfort of the crowd. He died alone, collapsed in the street, having lived exactly as he chose. They called it tragic. I call it consistent. Modern dating culture is allergic to this kind of sovereignty. It preaches vulnerability and emotional availability as virtues. But what it really means is, be needy in socially acceptable ways. And it tells men to open up, but punishes them when what opens isn't pretty. It demands connection but offers only transaction. It promises intimacy but delivers performance. The men who wear the invisible crown have opted out of this theater, not from bitterness. Bitterness is just another form of need. but from a kind of radical self-possession that makes them simultaneously the most attractive and most unattainable people in any room. They're attractive because they don't need you. They're unattainable because they don't need you. It's a paradox that drives the needy mad and leaves the sovereign smiling. So, here's my challenge. Carved in the cold stone of 4 a.m. honesty. Can you spend a week without trying to impress anyone? Without checking if someone watched your story? Without crafting your loneliness into a fishing line, hoping to catch sympathy or sex? Can you sit with yourself without entertainment, substances, or the drug of other people's attention? Try it. Not as punishment, but as coronation. Every hour you don't reach for your phone is a jewel in your crown. Every evening you spend reading instead of swiping is an expansion of your kingdom. Every decision you make from wholeness rather than hunger is a declaration of sovereignty. The crown nobody sees is forged in the fires of unchosen solitude and chosen solitude alike. But only those who choose it get to wear it. The rest just carry its weight without its power, longing for a throne they're sitting on but can't feel. Your kingdom awaits. But first, you have to be willing to rule it alone. When you stop begging the universe for mercy, you discover you were the universe all along. Shh, listen. Do you hear that? It's the sound of 10,000 men on their knees, praying to be loved, to be chosen, to be enough. Their whispered desperations rise like smoke from sacrificial altars. Please, let her text back. Please, let this one be different. Please, let me finally feel whole. And somewhere in the cosmic dark, something ancient and terrible is laughing. It's laughing because it knows what they don't. They're praying to themselves. I once met God in a gas station bathroom at 3 a.m. Not the God of churches and comfortable promises. No, this was the God that Nietzsche killed and found hiding in the mirror. I was washing the taste of another failed relationship from my mouth, avoiding my own eyes in the fluorescent honesty, when suddenly I understood. The face staring back at me, hollow-eyed and 3 days unshaven. That was the only deity that would ever answer my prayers, and it was tired of my begging. God is dead, Nietzsche declared, and everyone thinks he meant it as tragedy. But have you read the rest? And we have killed him. This wasn't a funeral announcement. It was a birth certificate. The death of God is the birth of the godlike in man. But most men would rather stay on their knees than stand up and discover they have no one to pray to but themselves. Here's the cosmic joke that makes angels weep with laughter. Every prayer for love is a confession of self-hatred. Every "please send me someone" is really "please send me someone to convince me I'm worth something." We've turned romantic love into a religion where women are goddesses and men are supplicants, forever prostrating themselves before the altar of feminine validation. A 2024 study from Berkeley found that men who describe themselves as hopeless romantics show higher levels of external locus of control. Psychology speak for believing your life is determined by forces outside yourself. They're literally praying to false gods, sacrificing their sovereignty on altars built from dating profiles and desperate 2 a.m. texts. But let me tell you about the heretics. The men who stopped praying. There's a man in Prague who hasn't been on a date in 7 years. Not because he can't. Women approach him regularly, drawn by something they can't name. It's the same thing that makes priests compelling, the complete absence of need. He told me, over beer that tasted like liquid amber. I stopped looking for my other half when I realized I was already whole. Now I'm just curious who else might be whole enough to walk beside me without leaning. The Gnostics believed that the God of the Old Testament was actually a false deity, a demiurge who convinced humans they were powerless so he could feed on their worship. The real God, they said, was the divine spark within each person, trapped but not extinguished. Every prayer to the false god was a betrayal of the true one burning in your chest. This is what modern men do with love. They pray to the demiurge of romance, offering their dignity as burnt offerings, their self-respect as tithes. They kneel before dating apps like digital altars, swiping through profiles like rosary beads, hoping for salvation from the hell of their own company. Meanwhile, the God who laughs at prayer the one living in their chest, the one they've been ignoring, grows quieter, smaller, dimmer, until one day, usually after enough humiliation, enough rejection, enough nights spent praying to the ceiling fan for someone to save them from themselves, they hear it. The laugh, not cruel, but liberating. The laugh of recognition. The laugh that says, "You magnificent fool, you've been praying to yourself all along." There's an old Zen koan. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. It means that any external Buddha is false. The real Buddha is reading these words right now, pretending to be you. The same is true for love. If you meet your salvation in another person, kill the illusion. Your salvation is reading these words right now, pretending to need someone else. I'll tell you something that will sound like madness until the moment it becomes your only truth. The day you stop praying for love is the day you become lovable. Not because you've given up, but because you've grown up. Because you've finally understood that every prayer for external validation is a vote of no confidence in your own divinity. The men who've learned this secret walk differently. They love differently too. Not from poverty, but from abundance. Not from need, but from overflow. They don't date to fill holes in their souls because they've learned the holes were holy, spaces where the light gets in. They don't seek their better half because they've discovered they're already complete. And anyone worth their time would be complete too. Nietzsche's madman in The Gay Science ran through the marketplace shouting, "God is dead." But people didn't understand. They thought he was announcing a funeral. He was announcing a coronation. With God dead, man must become godlike. With no one to pray to, we must become worthy of our own prayers. But here's the final twist of the knife. The last laugh of the God who refuses worship. This isn't about becoming arrogant or narcissistic. Those are just new forms of prayer, new ways of seeking external confirmation. True self-deification is quieter. It's the man who helps others without needing recognition, who creates without needing applause, who loves without needing reciprocation, who lives as if he's the only God who will ever answer his prayers. Because he is. The universe isn't cruel. It's not kind. It's not anything. It's a mirror reflecting back exactly what you bring to it. Bring desperation, find emptiness. Bring wholeness, find abundance. Bring prayer, find silence. Bring divinity, find home. So, here's my final question, whispered like a secret that could end the world, or begin it. What if you stopped praying? What if you stood up from your knees, brushed off the dust of centuries of genuflection, and faced the mirror with the terrible courage of recognition? What if you stopped seeking God in others' eyes and met the one staring back from your own? The God who laughs at prayer isn't mocking you. He's inviting you to join the joke, to realize that every moment spent begging the universe for love was a moment you could have spent being the universe, giving love. That every prayer for salvation was a denial of the Savior already living in your chest, waiting for you to stop looking elsewhere. Stand up. The prayers are over. Your coronation begins now, or stay on your knees. The God who laughs at prayer will wait. He has all the time in the world. After all, he is you.